What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Darren Aronofsky film, Mother. Mother is written and directed by Darren Aronofsky, stars Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, Ed Harris, Michelle Pfeiffer, and a couple other really famous people that just randomly show up, and when you see them you're like, huh, I didn't know you were in this movie. It tells the story of a wife who is currently remodeling her husband's old Victorian home that's out in the woods. It's Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, and he's a writer who is having a lot of writer's block. He's struggling to come up with stories, and while he does that, Jennifer Lawrence has been rebuilding this house. So one night when Ed Harris shows up at their house randomly, and Javier Bardem sort of invites him in, then weirder things start to happen. The floor begins to bleed in the house, and then Michelle Pfeiffer shows up because she is Ed Harris's wife, and then more people start to show up until this house is sort of like engulfed in chaos. And it's a really, really interesting, deep movie with a lot of layers, and it was a very interesting watch in theaters. Aronofsky is known for making films that are sort of on the dark and weird side, like Black Swan is a previous film of his, and I think that this movie definitely falls into that category. Now, he handled this movie beautifully. It is directed so well. Every single shot is gorgeous. It's a lot of close-ups. It's very personal with the character that Jennifer Lawrence is playing in the film, and it's a lot of her perspective. She has a massive role in this film, and she does a phenomenal job in that role. This is maybe Jennifer Lawrence's best performance. It is definitely in her top 3 best. She's amazing in this film. She's breathtakingly somber and silent, yet you know every single emotion she is feeling, even when she isn't saying anything, which is really impressive. Javier Bardem is also amazing. Ed Harris is great. Michelle Pfeiffer is great. All of the performances in this movie are really phenomenal from everyone that's in it. The film also has little to no music or score of any sense in it. It's almost all just audio from the film itself, which is really, really interesting, but also extremely riveting when you're watching it. All of the sound is extremely crisp. Every little sound effect, you hear it. You hear the floor creak. You hear the door make a squeak when it gets opened. You hear him set his pen down on his desk. All of it is so loud and abrupt, so that way you are so aware and so intensely invested in every single sequence. The visual effects in the film are gorgeous. There are a lot of very impressive visuals throughout this film, and I think that's the big thing. Aronofsky has made a film here that a lot of people are going to really dislike, and a lot of people are going to hold in extremely high esteem, because this film has a ton of symbolism and allegories to biblical times, to religious beliefs, to the world itself, to the society we live in, and there's all kinds of extremely deep and intense meanings throughout this film that you can pull in so many different directions. And I think that that's a giant strength of this film, is that you could re-watch it and maybe come up with a different theory. There's not really necessarily one definitive answer. While each person that watches it could have what they think it means, in Aronofsky's mind, maybe he does have one definitive answer as to what this whole film means. But for everyone watching it, you can pull something different. I have what I think the story meant and what it was about, and I think that there's one very prevalent view as at the moment from people, and I think that it's probably a correct view as to what it all means. But that's the thing, a lot of people are going into this film not knowing what to expect, and they're getting something that's very different from really any movie that's came out so far this year. And then the setting of this film, this old giant Victorian house out in the middle of the forest, is a beautiful setting, because while each individual character has their reasons for feeling isolated and for feeling scared and worried, they are all simultaneously isolated and scared and worried out in this house in the forest, because they're so far away from any other civilization or anyone that could help them if anything were to go wrong. Now, while I really enjoyed this film and it was a very intense watch in theaters, it definitely had its issues, and it's definitely not a movie for everyone. Number one, this movie was just mismarketed. It's being marketed as almost like a horror thriller, when in reality it's more like a dark intellectual indie film. It's pretty much how I would describe this movie, honestly. It's got a budget bigger than your average indie film, obviously, because look at the people in it. However, that's what it is. It's not some horror thriller. It may have elements of that at moments, but it's not overall in that genre, in my opinion. And I think that to go along with that, this movie in most people's minds is really pretentious. And to me, that's not an issue that's huge, because I can enjoy a film even if the film's kind of full of itself and it thinks that it knows so much about the world and that it's sending this massively important message. This movie definitely has that sort of gusto to it of thinking that it's so great. But that's okay to me. However, I think for most audience members, they do not enjoy that, and while I didn't personally enjoy it, I was able to move past it and watch the film and take in what the movie was trying to say. And then to go along with that, the film is also just so crammed with symbolism and allegories and metaphors and all this stuff that at times it's just overwhelming. Like I said earlier, the last half hour of this movie, last half of it maybe, is fucking bonkers. Like, it's wild the amount of stuff that's going on, and when it's happening, there are times where it just keeps going and going and going, where eventually it gets to a point where you're just like, what is happening? Like, there's too much here to where I'm losing the context of where I'm at and what it's supposed to mean, and it just feels like it's here for like the craziness value. And while that sort of tones down again near the end, there's a point where it just keeps going and it's right in your face, just smacking you, and I really thought that that was an issue, because the last half of this film is where you're gonna lose, I'd say 60% of the audience, because unless people go in knowing who Aronofsky is and knowing the type of film that they're getting themselves into, they think they're just walking into an average horror thriller, but that is not at all what this movie is. This movie has, like I've said multiple times in this review, it's really dark and intellectual and has all these layers as to what it's supposed to mean and represent. Because when this movie ended, the guy sitting 2 seats down from me at the movie literally looked over at his wife and just goes, well, what the fuck was that? And I was sitting there like, you know, there's so much to talk about, and obviously I'm not going to try to explain anything to that guy. He can have his own mind and, you know, think about it how he wants to. But that's the reaction that a lot of people will have with this film, and I think that that's why, in terms of audiences that are seeing it, it's getting reviewed so poorly. I'm gonna give Mother a B. I think that this is a film that is begging to be watched more than one time. It has so much symbolism and so much meaning, and I think that there's so many different meanings that you can pull out of it from all the different stuff that is crammed within this film, and it really requires multiple viewings. I think I could possibly love this movie if I saw it more times, but I could maybe hate it if I watched it more times, and that's why right now I'm so middle of the road on it, because it was such an interesting film to watch in theaters, and there's so much to it, and I've been thinking about it non-stop since I watched it, but I also think that it has its issues in thinking that it's so much better and more important than other films. I want to watch this movie more, but I do not recommend this movie to everyone if you like films that challenge you, that make you think, where when you walk out you aren't just like, oh, that was fun, and then you move on with your life. This is a film that you want to talk to people about. It's a film that you want to think about for longer, and if you enjoy movies like that, then I would recommend it. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this review, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Mother, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.